Hey, so I'm running on like 2.5 hours of sleep because I've been traveling all day, and I'm back home, and it's later than I expected to stay up, and I still need to make a video for you all, so let's do this. It's late, we're both tired, let me read to you about dinosaurs. So snuggle up, and I will read you basically some snippets out of a chapter from Donald Prothero's book, The Story of the Dinosaurs in 25 Discoveries, Amazing Fossils and the People Who Found Them. Specifically, this is about an early dinosaur called Coelophysis and the role that serendipity, a little bit of luck, can importantly play in paleontology and other sciences. So here we go. He begins the chapter with a quote from Edwin Colbert in his 1995 book, The Little Dinosaurs of Ghost Ranch, this is the scientist who we will meet shortly. Here's the quote he starts with. The discovery of Coelophysis at Ghost Ranch is a good example of the role of serendipity in paleontological research. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, serendipity is a word coined by Horace Walpole upon the title of a fairy tale, The Three Princes of Serendip, the heroes of which were always making discoveries by accidents and sagacity of things they were not in quest of. Exactly so at Ghost Ranch. And here's how the chapter begins. In the summer of 1947, paleontologist Edwin Harris Ned Colbert was planning a field session at the Petrified Forest of Arizona to look for Triassic fossils. Colbert had gone through the arduous process of getting a permit from the National Park Service to collect in the Petrified Forest National Monument, which took months of getting signatures in the federal bureaucracy, all the way up to the top, with the signature of the Secretary of the Interior himself. Then there's a little bit of biography about Ned Colbert, and explaining that he was in New Mexico at the time. However, before he left New Mexico, he wanted to check out a locality just north of Abiquiu. Abiquiu. I'm going with Abiquiu. I'm going to try that again. However, before he left New Mexico, he wanted to check out a locality just north of Abiquiu, which had yielded fossils he saw in the Berkeley collections. It was known as Ghost Ranch. Colbert and his crew drove up to Ghost Ranch, and the owners let them live in one of the comfortable spare ranch houses. His crew consisted of George Whitaker, a young preparator at the American Museum, and Tom Girardi, a professor at City College in New York, and an enthusiastic fossil collector who had worked with Colbert before. On June 19, 1947, they began prospecting across the Badlands exposures of brick-red mudstones of the Upper Triassic Chinle Formation, finding bone scraps and a few better Triassic fossils, such as the crocodile-like archosaurs known as phytosaurs. On June 22nd, they were prospecting when a very excited George Whitaker came running over the hill to get Colbert and Girardi to come see what he had found. As Colbert wrote, "As he scrambled up the slope toward us, it was evident that he was very excited. He had a right to be. In his hands, he had some tiny bone fragments, including a well-preserved claw. They were the fossil remains of Coelophysis, a small Triassic dinosaur." Then Prothero, the book author, continues, "The excavation continued a few more days until it became clear that it was a huge deposit with many intact skeletons. Colbert realized that Whitaker had made an incredible discovery that would require all their resources. Yet he still had the hard-won permit to go work in Petrified Forest. What to do? He was worried about annoying all the people in the Department of Interior who had approved his permit, only to find out that he did not use it. But the Ghost Ranch find was the opportunity of a lifetime." A bit later, Prothero includes a personal note explaining that he knew George Whitaker when he was a student at the American Museum in 1976 and 1982. "He was about to retire, but he told me many tales of his exploits when I used to hang out with him in the lab. He was a genuine hero. In 1956, he was with George Gaylord Simpson on an expedition up the Amazon. In camp one day, a crew member cut down a tree, which fell on Simpson and crushed him and broke many bones in his body. Whitaker did his best first aid with splints and bandages, then spent a week canoeing down the Amazon to rush him to the nearest town where he could be flown out to a real hospital. Without George Whitaker, the legendary paleontologist George Gaylord Simpson would have died in the Amazon." Sometimes serendipity strikes and you have to snatch the opportunities in front of you rather than doggedly stay with your previous plans. It happens all the time in science. The Bell Lab engineers who were trying to get the background noise out of their microwave antennas accidentally discovered the cosmic background radiation from the Big Bang. Walter Alvarez, doing analyses of rock from the end of the Cretaceous in Gubbio, Italy, accidentally discovered the evidence for the asteroid impact. Alfred Nobel accidentally found how to put together two chemicals to make a more stable explosive, dynamite. The Raytheon engineers, stuck with excess magnetrons after World War II ended, discovered that they melted a chocolate bar in their lab coats, and the microwave oven was born. The Coelophysis bone bed at Ghost Ranch turned out to be a truly unique discovery. Several thousand bones were found, making up many dozen of articulated skeletons. A couple pages later, the Coelophysis quarry samples were truly amazing in their quantity and state of preservation. Most of the specimens were complete and articulated individuals in death poses. Nearly all had their necks drawn backward in an arc over their backs. This is a common effect caused when the nuchal ligament, which pulls the neck and head up, starts to shrink and pull backward after the animal dies. Full-grown adults of Coelophysis were about 3 meters, 9.8 feet in length, and varied in weights from 15 to 20 kilograms, 33 to 44 pounds. They were lightly built with long-running legs and a long tail with interlocking vertebrae that kept the tail rigid and sticking straight out behind the animal. Here's a couple paragraphs just for the YouTube watchers because we have a little bit more time here. To some paleontologists, voice crack immediately. To some paleontologists, the large number of individuals from the same bone bed suggests that Coelophysis lived in large packs and probably hunted that way as well. Other scientists are not convinced of this and think that the large number of specimens just happened to get trapped in the same spot, possibly around a drying up waterhole. They clearly died slowly and had time to dry out, so their necks were pulled back before they were buried, possibly in a flash flood. However, there is a locality in Zimbabwe where over 30 individuals of Coelophysis rhodesiensis are found together in similar circumstances. This suggests that their large numbers were not a coincidence, but are indications of true pack behavior. Whether they lived and hunted together or not, the large numbers of complete Coelophysis specimens at Ghost Ranch provides paleontologists with an unusual window into the growth and development of a population. By analyzing the dimensions and growth lines in the thigh bone, paleontologists have discovered that Coelophysis babies grew very rapidly during their first year of life. The sample had 4 distinct size clusters that represented separate growth stages, with 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and adults more than 7 years old. In addition to the differences caused by growth, both juveniles and adults seem to show 2 different distinctive forms, one with more robust forelimbs and the other with gracile forelimbs. This is thought to be due to sexual dimorphism, where the males and females differ in some parts of their body. This is also suggested by the fact that the robust and gracile forms are in roughly a 50-50 ratio, typical of many populations of animals with slight differences between males and females. And here's how the chapter ends. The study of Coelophysis goes on, and serendipity can strike at any time. There were so many specimens that many of the blocks that had the Coelophysis remains in them remain unprepared and sitting in the American Museum basement. Colbert himself didn't get around to finishing a complete monograph on Coelophysis until 1989, almost 40 years after this first specimen was collected. In 2005, American Museum graduate student Sterling Nesbitt was poking around through these unopened field jackets looking for some more Coelophysis to study. He opened one cast that had been sat in storage for almost 60 years and immediately realized that the specimen inside was not another Coelophysis. Instead, it was a primitive relative of the crocodilians. However, it had a long neck and a toothless beak, as well as a bipedal build with long hind limbs, so its body form converged on that of the ornithomimid dinosaurs, 80 million years before that group had ever evolved. Nesbitt and his advisor, American Museum dinosaur paleontologist Mark Norrell, wrote up and published a study of the fossil in 2006, which garnered a lot of publicity. Nesbitt and Norrell named the fossil Ephysia o'Keeffe. The genus name Ephysia is from the Latin word for ghost, as in Ghost Ranch. And the species is named in honor of Georgia O'Keeffe, who had spent so many years at Ghost Ranch painting its amazing landscapes. You never know what you might find in a museum basement. The best fossil hunting isn't always in the field. Almost every museum is full of unstudied or poorly understood fossils that have just been sitting there for decades, waiting for a paleontologist who understands what he or she is looking at to come along. Some of them are still in their field jackets. Also, one quick fun fact just for the YouTube viewers. I don't remember if this is precisely mentioned in the original paper describing Ephysia, or if it's just something that somebody else sort of put together as a fun idea. But regardless, being named after the word for ghost is not only fun because it's from Ghost Ranch, but also for this exact reason that it was sitting in the basement for 60 years before being discovered. As though like the spirit of this animal had been sort of a ghost lurking in the shadows of this museum for a very long time before somebody finally found it. Thanks for taking a minute to read with me. I haven't read this full book, but I've read a couple sections and it's really good. Would highly recommend. As always, leave a comment with what dinosaur you'd like me to talk about tomorrow for the next day of Dinovember.